So circling back to her text that she just sent me earlier this year in January, of her asking if I had any interest in catching up and chatting, my first thought was oh my God, what? Of course I want to catch up. So we did. And it's funny, when we first jumped on the phone and started catching up, we literally stayed on the phone catching up for over 2.5 hours. Hey there, it's Suzanne Oshima, life coach for women in midlife, and your fellow sister on a mission to empower and inspire you through the twists and turns of midlife. I'm here to help you transform it into your best life with the Life Is Now, Do It While You Can podcast. We only get one life, so let's make it count, and I'm super excited to dive into this new journey together. I have a question for you. Has this ever happened to you? Have you had a really good friend that you just somehow lost touch with? And it could have been for any reason, such as maybe it's because you guys grew apart, or maybe your lives went in two completely different directions. Or maybe one of you moved to a different city or state. Or maybe it was because, honestly, for no reason at all. You know, sometimes that just happens. You just kind of lose touch and you haven't talked to this person in years. Well, if that's ever happened to you, I want to share a story with you that happened to me recently this year. So back in January of this year, I got a text from an old friend who I knew when I lived in New York City that I hadn't talked to in a long time. And for those of you that are new here, so just a little quick background is I used to live in New York City, and I lived in New York City for 22 years. And 5 years ago, I moved from New York City to California. I live in Newport Beach, California. Anyways, so I had moved out of New York and I hadn't talked to this friend in a very long time. Probably, quite honestly, the last time we maybe talked on the phone was maybe 10 years ago or more. Anyways, she sent me a text earlier this year in January and she said, "Hi, stranger, blast from the past here. How are you? I think about you often and hope you're doing well." Anyways, in this text, she went on to ask if I was doing okay because she had heard on the news about all the fires here in Southern California back in January. And so she was like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? I just want to check in and see how you're doing," which was obviously, it was so sweet. And in the same text, she also shared with me that her oldest son was applying to colleges, and he was looking at schools out here in California. Anyways, of course, she was saying in this text that she had so many mixed emotions. If you're a mother and your children are going off to college, or have gone off to college, I'm sure you can relate to how my friend Deborah was feeling, because her oldest son, and this was her first, this was a big change, not only for her, but also for her son. He's entering a new chapter in her life, his life, I mean. And it was just a lot of big changes. And so, of course, she was having all these mixed emotions. And she was also obviously thinking about not only is he going away to college, but he's choosing a college that's about 3,000 miles away from home because they live in New Jersey. Anyways, at the end of the text, she said this. She said, "If you have any interest in catching up, I would love to hear your voice and chat. Let me know." So let me give you a little bit of background info. Deborah and I have actually been friends for 27 years, which is crazy. I didn't even realize that until I started to do the math. I was like, oh my gosh, we've known each other for 27 years. And while I was living in New York City, and she lived in Manhattan too at the time when we first met, we were really close then. And we were both living the whole Sex and the City lifestyle, and we both loved living in New York City. But then eventually, her life changed, and we grew apart, quite honestly, because Deborah got married. She moved to Jersey. and she had children. So our paths went in completely different directions. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. We just grew apart. Anyways, we were still connected on social media, which was nice because social media still gives you updates on people's lives, right? And I could see pictures of her children growing up and what was going on in her life, and vice versa. She would see what was going on in my life and what I was doing. But it's funny because with social media, you feel very connected, but you're also disconnected because, like I said, we probably hadn't talked on the phone in about 10 years. And so, believe it or not, though, like I was thinking about this, is even though we hadn't talked on the phone in 10 years and we hadn't seen each other in probably 10 years too, is, believe it or not, that didn't mean we weren't close friends. Deborah and I always had an amazing friendship. And we always enjoyed spending time together, getting together, laughing and crying through all of life's ups and downs. You know, one of those friends that you just are so connected in that way that you just get each other and you're there for each other. Anyways, you know, I think back to the times when I was living in New York City, and there were many times that I was going through a tough time. She was one of those friends that was always there for me. Like I could call her and she'd always be there and be there to listen and offer support and understanding. Anyways, deep down inside, I always knew on any given day I could pick up the phone and reach out to her and she would be there for me, and vice versa. So circling back to her text that she just sent me earlier this year in January, of her asking if I had any interest in catching up and chatting, my first thought was oh my God, what? Of course I want to catch up. So we did. And it's funny, when we first jumped on the phone and started catching up, we literally stayed on the phone catching up for over 2.5 hours. And she told me all about her life. I shared with her about mine. We caught each other up. And she also told me, as I mentioned to you, that her son was looking at colleges, applying to colleges in California. And she told me, she said, you know, I'm going to bring him out for spring break to California, and I want to take him to tour all the colleges this spring in hopes that, you know, he would figure out the right college that he would choose to go to in the fall. And so she said, you know, I'm going to Northern California and Southern California. So she was definitely going to pass through Newport Beach. And she said, I would love to get together with you for a visit and, you know, lunch, dinner or something or whatever. And of course I was open to that. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, let me know when you're going to be out here. I would love to meet up in person and catch up then. Anyways, so fast forward to just last week, Deborah and her son came to California and they saw several colleges in Northern California, UC Santa Cruz, they went down to UC Santa Barbara. They came through Newport and then they went down to San Diego. But anyways, so she stopped off here in Newport Beach and she ended up staying here in Newport Beach for a few days. And I was so excited. I told her, you know what? I'm going to take off whatever time you're here I'm going to take off work for the entire time you're here. And we'll go and do stuff. I'll show you around. We'll go and have fun. So I did. I took off 3 days from work and it was the absolute best. We literally picked up exactly where we left off over 10 years ago. And literally nothing had changed at all in our friendship. It's just that we were a little older, right? And we caught up on each other's lives, and we had so many moments where we just laughed so hard that my stomach hurt, because that's how our friendship was. We had the same sense of humor. And we cried when there were moments where we were both overwhelmed by certain things going on in our lives. And we were both there for each other. And it was so, so nice. And we did so much fun stuff. We went sightseeing. I took them to watch the surfers and the boogie boarders. And we watched the sunset at dinner. We went kayaking in Newport Harbor. And we walked around Laguna Beach. And we did this over 3 days. We didn't take a break. We literally hung out every single day and night. And quite honestly, it couldn't have been any better. It was absolutely amazing. And both her and I were so happy. Anyways, when the time came for her and her son to continue on their trip and leave Newport Beach and go on to San Diego, not gonna lie, I was so sad. And she was too. And I realized how much I truly missed hanging out with her and having that really good friend by my side through all of life's ups and downs. And I kept telling her, I kept saying, you have to move here. I always do that. Whenever friends come to visit me and they like this area, I'm like, move here. I always try to get people to move here. And while she loves it here, obviously, she's not moving here. She has a husband back in New Jersey, but we just laughed and we were like, well, we can dream about it. We can pretend that we're going to be roommates later on in life. That's not going to happen, but it would have been a fun thought to have that if she really wanted to move here. But anyways, the good news is her son will be going to college out here. So I will be seeing more of her during the school year comes, when the school year comes, because she's going to come visit him more often. She's like, I'll totally stop in Newport Beach before or after she goes to see her son. So I'm going to see her more often than not. And of course, when I go back to New York City, I will definitely get together with her back there. And it was so great because we even talked about doing a girls' trip later this year, because she was like, oh, I've always wanted to go on a yoga retreat. Is that something you'd be interested in? I'm like, yeah. So we're looking at doing that later this year, somewhere fun and exciting, hopefully with a beach. And I can't wait. We both can't wait. And I have to tell you, I am so happy that we reconnected and we rekindled our amazing friendship. We never lost that. Even though, like I said, our lives took different paths and we lost touch for a while, we still had an amazing friendship. And all it took was Deborah sending that one little text earlier this year to rekindle that friendship. So I want to share a quote with you. And I love this quote. It's, good friends are like stars. You don't always see them, but you know they are always there. I'm going to repeat that because I think it's such a beautiful quote. Good friends are like stars. You don't always see them, but you know they are always there. And I share this with you because I will bet that you've been thinking about an old friend lately. A friend that you had the type of deep connection and friendship like Deborah and I have. But maybe you've lost touch with her for one reason or another, which isn't important. It's just maybe your lives went in a totally different direction, and so you just kind of grew apart, but you've always thought of that person as a really good friend that you really miss connecting with. So I'd like to encourage you to reach out to her like Deborah did to me. And if you're nervous about doing that, going, oh God, what if she doesn't want to talk to me? What if she's not interested in reconnecting? My suggestion to you is this, is to just be authentic like Deborah was to me and tell her how you've been thinking about her and how you would love to reconnect and catch up. And I will bet when you reach out, she'll welcome you with open arms. She'll probably be so excited that you reached out to her and would love to reconnect with you too. So I encourage you to take that first step and just send the text, just send the email and see what happens. Because I'm going to bet you'll be so happy you did. Before you leave, can I get real with you? When I first moved from New York City to California 5 years ago, I had left all of my closest friends, and I felt isolated and alone in a new city. And I'll be honest, even though I consider myself really friendly and outgoing, it was really challenging to make new friends at this point in my life. And then it hit me. I was like, I can't be the only one feeling this way. I was like, if I'm feeling this way, I'll bet there are other women my age that are facing the same struggles. And I will tell you, I was right. So many women have shared their fears with me about how hard it was and is to make new friends and how isolated and alone that they felt on this journey in midlife. And my heart broke because no woman should have to navigate midlife alone, and neither should you. And that's exactly why I created the Circle of Love Sisterhood, because midlife should be a time to thrive, connect, and build genuine friendships with women who truly understand and support you. So if you're looking to make new friends in midlife, the kind that are there for you to celebrate the wins and uplift you during the challenging times, check out the Circle of Love Sisterhood. The doors only open a few times a year, and we will be opening the doors at the end of April. So join a sisterhood where you can connect and build lasting friendships. Go to SuzanneOshima.com/waitlist. And you'll be the first to know when the doors open to welcome you in.